What's going on, everyone? Welcome into Forward Progress. It's week 18 best bets live here on the Forward Progress YouTube channel, part of the Hammer Betting Network and powered by Pinnacle Sportsbook. We're back to the regular rotation this week. Holiday festivities over. It's myself, Rob Pizzola, Eric Eager in the top right-hand corner, Suma bottom right, Hitman back, bottom left, and made sure that he let us know that he is on a best bet winning streak upon his return. With the caption, the leans have been fire though, Hitman. I mean, how was the holiday break? Skating with the wife, Rockefeller Square, whatever. All that went well. A couple weeks off.
You know what? During the holidays, I bet some more, and I had an okay break. So let's keep it going.
All right, we'll keep it going this week. For those who are new here, it's the usual format. We're going 4 games this week. They're not the prettiest games, but games that we have some sort of opinion on here in week 18. If we do get to 100 likes over the course of the stream, we will each add in, well, I won't say we will each add in, but we're going to discuss futures markets, AFC champion, NFC champion, Super Bowl futures. We'll talk about that towards the end of the show. We need 100 likes over the course of the stream to get to that point. We will end the show with a best bet from each one of us. And of course, as always, we'll try to make this as forward-looking as possible. Not about who we already bet, but giving you as much actionable information as possible going forwards. As usual, we start with a recap. For the second consecutive week, we finished 2-2 in best bets. I'll be a glass half full guy here because that's 4 straight weeks of 500 or better. But I got the L, big time L, Pittsburgh, Seattle under. Good market agreement. Unfortunately, that never had a chance. Suma probably going to have nightmares of the Rams special teams as well for the next decade. Played -4.5 Rams, closed -6.5. Unfortunately, the CLV doesn't pay the utility bills in Germany right now. So that's an L there. Eric finished 2023 on a high note. Easy winner. The Packers, Sunday Night Football. Easy winner might be an understatement. That game was over as I made the trip over to my sister's house for New Year's Eve. I turned on the score. I was like, holy shit, what happened here? But Eric cashes that very quickly. And of course, producer Jason put on the spot to give a pick, moves to 2-0 on the year. Jared Stidham and the Broncos get it done for him. I bring that up because his 2 wins on 2 picks this season now equals Hitman's 2 wins on about 100 picks this season.
Do you want me to respond to that?
You have the floor if you want to.
Well, let's just move on. Let's get to the leans portion.
All right. The leans are bored. A good week for leans again last week. Myself, Hitman took a week off, and unfortunately that cost him the percentage points where the Pizza Man moves into the top spot here. But overall, as a group, 7-3 on the leans last week. It's been a pretty good year overall for just talking about these games and giving opinions. So hopefully we can get it going again or keep it going again this week. All right, let's get into it. Smash that like button down below, and let's start with the Dallas Cowboys and the Washington Commanders. Just some news recently out of Washington. Take it for what it's worth. Some people might suggest the Commanders trying to tank in some situation here, but Sam Howell gets the start instead of Jacoby Brissett in this game. The Commanders are limping to the finish line here. 7 straight losses down the stretch. They lost by 17 points last week to the 49ers, failed to cover as a 14-point dog. The Cowboys have clinched a playoff spot. They can win the NFC East with a victory. They squeaked by the Lions 20-19. Very controversial game in terms of obviously how that played out, failure to report, whatever the hell you want to talk about the storyline being in that game. But that one was certainly an interesting one on Saturday. Now, this one taken off the board based off of the quarterback news. But when it was up there earlier, actually, you know what? We just got a repost right now. We got Dallas minus 13.5 plus 102 current market at Pinnacle. And the total in the game, 45, juice to the over at minus 119. Sumo, we'll start things off with you here this week. Big price on the road for the Cowboys. Are you laying it? You look into the underdog Commanders, or does this whole Sam Howell situation change things for you a little bit?
Yeah, Sam Howell skews me off a little bit. I was looking towards Washington with Jacoby Brissett because I think this is a game for the Dallas Cowboys. Like, get in there to Washington, get the W somehow, get out of that, and prepare for the playoffs. And I think there are a lot of scenarios and like simulations where the Commanders' offense can move the ball, whether it's towards the end of the game, getting that backdoor cover, playing simply YOLO ball against a very susceptible Dallas Cowboys defense, terrible against the run, not great against the pass. So I thought there are some avenues, even with Sam Howell, where Washington even can score some points there and keep it somehow in that 7-13 range. But yeah, I would have preferred it with Jacoby Brissett because Sam Howell, like, that's also the scenario where, like, when he gets sacked like 5 times in the first half, he gets rattled and he might throw interceptions and the game could out of hand. So I thought there would be like a better distribution of outcomes with Jacoby Brissett.
Eric, as soon as Suma said there might be some outcomes here with Sam Howell, I saw you shaking your head immediately, like almost like you wanted to jump in immediately on the spot. I take it that you have no interest in Sam Howell and the Commanders at this point.
Well, I figured we could start a tweet thread about incentives because this feels like a perfect one. The first thread, Sam Howell right now leads the NFL in interceptions with 19. You might consider, I mean, he's probably got an incentive in his contract if he leads the league in interceptions. So consider betting over 0.5 picks in this game. He also leads the league in sacks taken at 61. So also consider betting the over on sacks in this one. I don't know the exact number. It hasn't been posted yet, but consider the over sacks.
Bet the ladder on sacks.
Yeah, and you got to look to Dallas's defensive line as well and see who has sack incentives. I mean, this is all just coming full circle here.
Exactly. Look, there's a number of different ways you can bet this one, irrespective of values. This is like this Washington team has made absolutely no effort. And I'm a big Sam Howell detractor. Obviously, I'm actually not. I just said he was a backup quarterback, which is correct. But they've like made almost no effort to like nurture Sam Howell. They kind of put him in like the worst position to succeed. And I think against this Dallas Cowboys offense or defense, I think it's obviously a really bad situation. Howell's last like actually good game was against Dallas on Thanksgiving, where he threw for a decent number of yards. He ended up throwing a pick 6 to Deron Bland at the very end, but for the most part, he was very respectable. And even in that game, they struggled to cover. When I look at this game, I don't really have an opinion on spread or total, but I do think this is going to be a game where I think that there's a decent amount of variance with respect to Howell. I do think that this one could get away from Washington, but that's the one for me. I have a hard time, seeing Washington being all that competitive, but it was the last game where Howell was actually, a competent NFL quarterback. So it keeps me away from Dallas in this one, even though I can't get on Washington either.
Hitman, I talked to you this morning and you had indicated a little bit that you had leaned towards Washington in this game. We didn't know who was going to start at quarterback. We talked to Suma. Suma has, basically said that the Howell announcement scares him off Washington a little bit. Are you in the same boat, or do you think, that there's still value with Washington at this number?
Yeah, it scares me off just a little bit. Still lean towards Washington. It's interesting that last week when it was going back and forth on if Howell was going to start or Brissett, like there was market movement based off that info bouncing around. And when Howell got announced as the starter, the market ended up moving towards San Francisco. They ended up closing 14.5 at Washington. And in this game, there wasn't a ton of movement off of it. Maybe it was just presumed that Howell's probably the quarterback. It would be my guess. But I think that it's just a little bit of a premium on Dallas at 13 after San Francisco closed 14 and a half last week. Obviously, there's been a lot of Dallas home road splits that have been talked about throughout the entire season. I'm not really a buyer on teams quitting in general. And I don't think that Washington has quit. Like, I know there's a lot of talk like, all right, this is a lame duck coach. He's going to be fired on Monday. But I mean, if there was a time to quit, they got down 27-7 at half against the Giants. I know Brissett came in for that second half, but they ended up making a comeback in that game and almost won that game. And then against San Francisco last week, even though they lost the game ultimately by 17 points, I didn't think that they quit or there was a lack of effort on Washington's hand in that game. And, you know, one thing that I think hasn't been talked about, at least enough, is that it's not out of the question that Dallas does some scoreboard watching. Like, there's a chance that Philly doesn't play guys for the entire game against the Giants. They probably, I lean that they will, but there's at least a chance that the Giants have a lead or something like that. And Dallas does some scoreboard watching in the fourth quarter. They're just not that aggressive to extend the lead. And even if they're not scoreboard watching and they do have a big lead against Washington, how much faith do you have knowing that they have to play next week, that they're going to continue to be aggressive in the fourth quarter and be motivated to get margin against this team? So I still could only look towards Washington.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the points you made there. And I think all those are valid because there's all sorts of situations that we don't know how the Eagles-Giants is going to play out. But potentially, who knows, Dallas goes up big early in this game and the Eagles just say, well, Dallas is up big. There's no sense in us continuing to play all of our offensive and defensive starters here. And then they pull them. That leads to Dallas pulling them. Like, we've seen these situations in week 18 before where teams are just looking at around the league as to what's happening and then adjusting their strategy in game on the fly based off of that. So, Patrick says live betting wet dream. I agree. I'm going to be very tuned in with live betting here in week 18 in the NFL. But honestly, I'm not far off being able to play Washington at this point. Maybe I wait and see if it ticks to 14 because it's obviously a much more valuable number. But generally speaking, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that you can look to Dallas in this game. All right, we'll move on here. As a reminder, before we do, Pinnacle, a proud sponsor here of the Forward Progress YouTube channel. We would never consider betting without Pinnacle as one of our sportsbook accounts because of their everyday competitive odds. We do have odds scrolling at the bottom of the stream over the course of breaking down all of these games. Oftentimes, you might go to your own sportsbook, the one that you're betting at. You might say to yourself, well, I'm not getting the same odds, not good enough odds to be able to bet what I want to bet in this game. Pinnacle prides themselves on these everyday competitive odds. So bet smart, bet Pinnacle, your trusted sportsbook for the past 25 years. And if you do sign up to Pinnacle in Canada, use code HAMMER as it does help support us here on Forward Progress. You must be 19 plus, not available in the US. And as always, please play responsibly. We'll move on to the other NFC East game this week as well. The Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants. Philadelphia tied for the lead in the NFC East, but not exactly, playing well heading into the final week of the season. They lose as a 12.5-point favorite last week to Arizona. They've now lost 4 of their last 5 games. Struggling going into the playoffs, to say the least. The Giants almost pulled off a nice comeback win against the Rams, but they fell short, 26-25. That's their 3rd straight loss in a row. 5-1 though against the spread in the last 6 games dating back to week 11. Hitman, we'll go over to you here first, looking at the current market in the game. It's the Eagles laying 5 on the road. Total in the game, 41.5, juice to the over. Break this one down for us. Do you think the market has overcorrected on the Eagles here? I know there's very differing opinions on the game, and some people looking at this as a Philly buy spot, or do you think that there's still potentially fade material here?
Again, like I spoke about with the Dallas game, like I'm not 100% confident that Philly plays guys. Like there's a lot of talk around Philly about that, even though they need to win and Dallas needs to lose to get the 2 seed and win the division. Like there's talk about resting guys with Philly. So I don't see how you bet Philly right now. Obviously, like if they did end up resting guys for the entire game, this line's going to move drastically. I mean, what do I think happens? I think that Philly ends up playing guys at least for the first half, and they do a lot of scoreboard watching. And if it becomes apparent that Dallas is going to win the game, they end up pulling the plug on their starters. So I think that it's Giants or nothing, to be honest. And even if the Eagles, like, let's say they do play their guys the whole game, like there's been a defense that's like completely bottoming out. And like one of the biggest concerns I have with the Eagles defense right now is we all know how bad their pass defense has been like the entire year, but their run defense allowed 221 yards to Arizona. They're 27th in yards per carry allowed to opposing running backs since week 11, just overall and defensive EPA. They're 30th since that time. And against the Eagles, they allowed a 68%, or excuse me, against the Cardinals, they allowed a 68% passing success rate to an Arizona team that was ranked 29th year to date in that category. Like this defense has some serious problems. Tyrod Taylor has obviously been a significant upgrade off of DeVito. So, I mean, it's Giants or nothing for me right now until we get any confirmation about what Philly's going to do with their starters. But I'll say this, like, I think that it's better than a non-0% chance that Philly doesn't play guys. I mean, I think they will, but Sirianni's come out and said that they're considering it. I've heard through some other Philly people that I talked to that, like, it's a serious consideration. So for me, I would lean towards the Giants.
Interesting. Suma, for this one, I mean, you got a firsthand look at the Giants last week, fading them, and it seemed like a lot went right for them in that game to hang around with the Rams. In this particular matchup, is this something that, like, you potentially look at fading the Giants again, or do you think Hitman's points are valid in the sense that you just don't really know what the Philly motivation is going to be like for the majority of the game?
I think both. So Hitman is right. So there's a scenario in which the Eagles rest their starters or some of their starters. I mean, Devonta Smith is already like super banged up. Don't expect him to play. If they play their starters and they take this game serious, I mean, there could also be the thought process like nothing's working on defense. Offense has not been clicking. Maybe try to get a get-right game, feel-good game before the playoffs start. I think in that scenario, the number might be a tad short, in my opinion, because they closed -14 2 weeks ago, and the Giants needed a lot of like fuckery, interception, return touchdown, short touchdown after a fumble to stay at -8 scoring in the end. So I think that if Eagles don't rest starters and take this game serious, I would like them at this current number, but simply don't know. I just don't see Tyrod Taylor again, like throwing like some lucky bombs down the field to Darius Slayton. And I just think that the Eagles at full strength might be a little bit better than the current market price.
Eric, there's a question here in the chat. Any chance the Giants pull their starters to maintain draft? It's funny that we even think about this, but I mean, is it a realistic possibility?
Yeah. I mean, we've seen this a number of times before. And, you know, the fact is the other leak in this entire thing is that Tyrod Taylor is not exactly a quarterback that has stayed all that healthy over the course of his career. So there is a leak of, you know, the fact that he could also just bow out of the game with an injury as well. The one part, and I don't have a particular lean on this game, but the thing that we're missing is, and this is maybe just me smarting from the fact that I laid the points in last week's show with the Rams, and I'm irritated about it, but the Giants have covered the last couple of weeks in large part based upon what Suma said, which is some luck. Like Gunnar Olszewski with like maybe the slowest punt return for a touchdown in the history of humankind. You also had Darius Slayton getting deep in 2 straight games when he's literally just never done anything over the past 2 years. You also had the interception return for a touchdown, as he said as well. I don't know. The Giants have been plucky, but I wouldn't necessarily say they've been fundamentally all that great over the past few weeks. The Eagles have had their own issues, though. Their offense has actually been fairly efficient the past few weeks, even more so than they have been over the first part of the season. Their defense has just been an absolute joke. And to Hitman's point, you don't know if they're going to play people. The one part that I would caution against, though, is the Falcons and the Bucks the Falcons and the Saints have been truly bad NFC South teams. The two easiest schedules in the league, probably both going to finish 8-9 or worse. The Bucks are not actually a bad football team. They have played like a kind of, a hard schedule as the league goes. If the Eagles are optimizing to play the Bucks, I think that they're being kind of stupid, because I actually do not think that this Eagles team, if they're resting their starters to play the Bucks, are actually being all that smart. And I do not think that the Eagles organization is sharper than to rest their starters and to play Tampa Bay next week. So I'll just caution against that and say that I actually think there's probably a better than average chance that they try to win this game and hope for a miracle in Washington and they win that division, because I do think the Bucks are actually a much better team than everybody else gave the NFC South division winner credit for at the beginning of the year.
This one is a weird one for me, because obviously we saw these teams play a few weeks ago. The market price, the closing price on that game was very different. That was DeVito starting. Tyrod Taylor came in relief of DeVito in that game. So you do have to give the Giants an upgrade. But honestly, like I think the Eagles are not good. Like their defense is bad to the point where I don't think that they can be laying these numbers anymore, because they just constantly give up scores. I mean, if we just look at their defense over the course of like the past 5 games, I have them ranked 30th in EPA adjusted for opponent, 30th in success rate adjusted for opponent. The only teams worse in that span, Seattle and Washington. If I look at them for the year as a whole now, I have them 23rd and 25th in those respective categories. Like, this is a defense that, in my opinion, last year, they could win these games by margin rather easily because their defense was able to hold up and generate pressure. But at these types of prices, I'm not with it on the Eagles anymore. So I have a pretty strong lean to the Giants here. I don't know if this is the number. I mean, it isn't the number that I'm going to bet the Giants at. But I mean, if you force me to pick one side or another in this game, it's going to be the New York Giants. So definitely differing opinions on this one. Before we get into game number 3, if you do enjoy the content here on Forward Progress, don't forget to hit that like button down below. If we get to 100 likes, we'll talk futures at the end of this show today. Make sure you're subbed here on the Forward Progress YouTube channel. We're like 80 subs behind our college partners on Hit the Books, Brad Powers and Joey Knish. Brad Powers, stand-up guy. I have no problems being defeated by him. Joey Knish, complete opposite. Complete opposite. So make sure you're subbed here on Forward Progress. Let's get us on top of those jabronis, or at least that one jabroni over on the Hit the Books channel. Your support means the world to us. If you're listening to this after the fact, kindly leave us a review on whichever podcast platform you're listening to as well. All right, we're switching divisions here. Chicago Bears, Green Bay Packers, NFC North. The Bears have won 2 games in a row. They've won 4 of their last 5. They picked up a pretty big win last week, covering as 2.5-point favorites. They blew Atlanta out of the water in that game. The Packers now up to 8-8. Very Jekyll and Hyde team this year. Definitely a roller coaster of a team. But Eric on them last week, destroying the Minnesota Vikings as 1-point favorites.
You're fine.
Current market price at Pinnacle, Packers -3. Key number, total 44. Key number. So we're sitting on 2 key numbers here. Eric, because you were on Green Bay as your best bet last week, I'll throw to you here first. Are you returning to the well with the Packers, or is this the opportunity to potentially fade Green Bay?
Yeah, I think this is swayed a little bit, probably too far in the direction of Green Bay. The Chicago Bears, I think one of the best kept secrets of the last probably month of the season is that the Chicago Bears have a legitimately good defense. Montez Sweat over the past, ever since he's gotten there, you're talking about a guy with 36 total pressures per PFF in just 252 pass rush, snaps. He's been involved in 8 sacks. He's got 13 stops in the run game. He's been an incredibly good edge setter for them, which was always a problem for them in the run game. The two linebackers that they acquired in free agency have both been at times really good. And then the secondary, you have Tyreek Stevenson, who had a tremendous game last week against Atlanta. They've been a legitimately good defense. And we've seen, Jordan Love has put up, tremendous numbers this year. One of the few quarterbacks in NFL history that has hit a bunch of benchmarks in year one as a starter. But the inconsistency there, when you look at Jordan Love's numbers, you're talking about very high ADOT. You're talking about relatively low completion percentage at times. And so with that, you get variance that I don't necessarily know is fitting of being favored by a number like this in a spot like this. So couple that with young receivers like they have, couple that with young tight ends like they have, and an offensive line which has played okay. But is coming off of playing a defense that coordinated by Brian Flores that has been up and down and kind of smoke and mirrors. I just don't think that the Packers warrant this kind of respect on the market. So I think Bears +3 is a pretty good number to take Chicago here.
All right, Eric, making the case for the Bears. Hitman, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Eric had to say. So credit to TA for this stat. But over the last 20 years, teams that need to win to get in against teams that are playing for nothing, they're 37% against the spread. So I feel like this spot obviously gets baked into the line a little bit. And then you have the fact like Chicago, we just know they're not going to lay down. It's full motivation and a rivalry against Green Bay. And then another stat that on the Green Bay side on their defense, which I actually seen on one of our followers page, is that against the Chiefs, Giants, Bucks, and Panthers, Green Bay allowed an explosive play on 16% of their opponents' plays, which essentially turned these four offenses into the 49ers over the entire season, what their numbers are for year to date. So, and then you look at all right, well, what happened? The Chiefs, after they played Green Bay, their offense has been not good against the Raiders and their other matchups. The Giants, Tommy DeVito was the quarterback that game. He played 6 quarters against the Saints and the Eagles after that and did absolutely nothing. The Panthers, Bryce Young threw for 300 yards against this defense, went up against Jacksonville the next week, who also has a really bad pass defense, and he threw for something under 4 yards per attempt. So I don't think that last week's game against the Vikings is anything to show us that this defense is back. It's still a bad defense that Green Bay has. They have injuries to their wide receivers, Jaden Reed. Dontavian Wicks is dealing with a high ankle sprain. That tends to linger throughout an entire season. And even if he plays, it compromises how good they are. And then Christian Watson, who knows at this point if he's going to be available for this game. The Bears defense since week 5 is third in EPA per play. They're first in explosive play rate allowed, which is pretty big against Jordan Love, who has been very willing to stretch the field vertically. And they're first in run defense also. So I just think that this Chicago team is still just a little bit undervalued in this spot. So I like Chicago also +3.
All right, that's 2 for 2 so far on the Bears side in this one, Suma. I see Patrick in the chat comparing this to the Week 18 Lions situation from last year. Again, team that's playing for nothing, trying to spoil the party for another team. Do you see this as a similar situation this year?
Yes, and to be honest, I don't really know what I can add here because these guys made all the points that I also wanted to make. Maybe a few more things. So I completely agree. I think from a motivational standpoint, this is the Chicago Bears Super Bowl of the season. They have a 0.1% chance to get in, but they don't care. They want to go to Lambeau Field and keep the vibes going and spoil the Packers playoff hopes. I truly believe that they will be 110% motivated. And something to add here, Bears, we talked about the defense. They arguably have the best run defense in the league right now. And what's interesting is that I didn't have last week's data, but from week 9 to week 16, they are also by far the best play action defense in the league. And offenses don't even try to run a lot of play action against them. They have only faced 26 play action attempts, second least amount over that stretch, and only 6 of those 26 attempts were successful. So they are playing the one very well. They are playing defending play action very well. I think that will take some stuff away of what the Packers want to do. And this is still a very, very young offense, young receiving group, banged up. We don't know whether Jalen Reed is going to play. I think Green Bay has always been very conservative. So I also don't think that there's a high chance that Christian Watson will be back. So young receiving group against a really, really stout defense. And on the other side, like, do you see a lot of scenarios where Joe Barry stops like this Bears offense? Like, Justin Fields has not been great, especially as a passer over the second half of the season. I think that the hype is a little bit overblown, but the way this Bears offense plays, the way that they can stretch defenses horizontally, I think that it's a very bad matchup for the Packers defense. And I would not be surprised if the Bears look very comfortable on offense.
Yeah, it's not just the Joe Barry situation. It's Joe Barry with this personnel in the secondary, in my opinion. Like, even when you add Jair Alexander back to the mix for the Packers, with Eric Stokes on IR, with Rasul Douglas traded, like, you're relying on Carrington Valentine and Keyshawn Nixon as guys who are going to shut down other receivers. And, like, I hate to break it to you, they're not going to do it. I mean, PFF grades are not the best measure in the world of impact. But if we're looking at corners this year, Valentine's 86th, Keyshawn Nixon is 84th. And those are guys who are going to see the field pretty regularly over the course of this game. So I'll make it a clean sweep here for the Forward Progress team in terms of I think the Bears are the valuable bet in this game. I think 3 is a very solid price to grab with Chicago in this one. Before we get into our final game here, the ultimate showdown is here. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, I'm talking about Hitman versus Cleve TA. Head-to-head in the ultimate NFL trivia bracket. That will be out this Friday over on the Hammer HQ on YouTube. So head over to the Hammer HQ. Make sure you're subscribed there. Hit that notification bell. And as soon as that goes live on Friday, we are crowning the winner of our NFL knowledge here at Forward Progress. Hitman or Cleve TA. Last few matchups, very intense. Hitman, you already know what's going to go down. This is apparently in the books already.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm Hulk Hogan. I took down Andre the Giant and Eric Eager. So next opponent,
I've been trying to lose some weight, but yeah.
The next opponent to put in front of me is like Randy Savage or the Ultimate Warrior or something like that. I think I could take it down, one of those guys down too. So I'm ready for the finals.
All right. The link is in the comments below. If you do want to subscribe to that, that's out on Friday afternoon. And poor Eric. I mean, he was inconsolable after he lost to Hitman. I was kind of inconsolable knowing that Hitman was going to the finals. If I'm going to be completely honest with you, I take a lot of pride in his suffering, but hopefully this one lives up to the hype. Friday on the Hammer HQ. Another game that we're hoping lives up to the hype is Sunday Night Football this week. Buffalo Bills, Miami Dolphins at Hard Rock Stadium, 8:20 Eastern time on NBC. Buffalo winners of 4 straight games. They've pulled themselves in position to win the AFC East. They squeaked by the Patriots last week. They didn't cover the spread, but they got the job done. Josh Allen, 3 interceptions in that game. Kind of an ugly performance, but a win is a win. The Dolphins, they lose 56-19 against the Baltimore Ravens. A disaster of a game for them. Tua didn't look right. I mean, really the lone bright spot for them was Devon Achane in that game, who had 107 total yards. Aside from that, just a catastrophic performance as a whole for the Dolphins. Suma, we'll go to you for Sunday Night Football here. Current market at Pinnacle, Bills -3, -105 in this game. Total is 50. Break it down for us. Bills, Dolphins, Sunday Night Football. Who do you like and why?
Yes, great game. I would hope to see a little bit more Dolphins money because I would entertain a bet on the Bills at anything under 3. I think that the Bills team, yes, their offense has been struggling in recent weeks, especially their passing offense. But I still think that I would expect some regression upwards in that department. And what I like about the Bills is that their defense is really, really back to a decent level, back healthy. Daquan Jones is back. He's been one of the best defensive tackles in the league up to the London game where he tore his pectoral, I think. Terrell Dodson is having a very decent, surprising season in the absence of Matt Milano. Their secondary is healthy. I think Rasul Douglas was a very good midseason addition. And they are facing a Dolphins offense that has not really been playing up to that elite standard or elite level. Like when you go back a few weeks, they had that one great game against Washington. But other than that, they have not really been that elite offense. They scored 30 points on the Jets, but a lot of that was aided by like short fields and turnovers. They struggled against the better defenses in the league. Jalen Waddle, he went to a walkthrough today, but coming off a high ankle sprain. So I would be surprised if he plays. And if he plays, I would be very surprised if he's not limited to like a certain snap count. So they are going to face a very disciplined, zone-heavy Bills defense with some injuries up front of their offensive line. Tua has not been that great against these kind of defenses. We also saw it in the first matchup, and I think that the Bills defense will also be able to defend the run, and then they will make it very, very hard on Tua in the pocket. And I just don't see a great Dolphins offensive output here. And then on the other side, no Bradley Chubb, no Jalen Phillips. I think that really takes some air out of this Dolphins defense when you miss your top tier pass rushers, because since Jalen Ramsey was back, I think there was a great cohesion between the secondary and the pass rush. Pass rush did not get home that much early in the season. Now you add a little bit more flavor in the secondary. Teams are not throwing too much on Jalen Ramsey's side. Now the pass rush has more opportunities, can get more coverage sacks, more coverage pressures, and now you basically take away some of these elements. I think Josh Allen will have success. I think that the Bills will be able to run the ball a little bit. So all in all, I'm leaning towards the Bills here. They're soft -3.
So Suma leaning towards the Bills. Hitman, you are leaning the opposite way in the game. Make the case for Miami here.
Yeah, I just think that, if you looked at the market ratings on these teams, like as recently as last week, like Miami's favored at home in this spot. Now, obviously the injuries have changed everything in this game, but that's why the line has moved as much as it has. And I just think that going through key numbers and getting up to 3, it's just a little aggressive. I'm going to monitor. I haven't even bet this yet, and I'm going to monitor the injury report. Obviously, Chubb and Phillips are out for the year. Xavier Howard is out for this game. I'm going to monitor the Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert, Javon Holland, the offensive line, Jerome Baker, Tua. We got to monitor all that and see how it shakes out. But if there is maybe some positive injury news, I think that the line probably only could go towards Miami, in my opinion. I just think that these injuries are accounted for with Buffalo at -3 right now. And Buffalo, their offense, like it hasn't been super pretty during this winning streak. Like, yes, they had 6.4 to 4.2 yards per play against the Chargers, but they still needed a game-winning field goal drive to win as 13-point favorites against Easton Stick and the Chargers. Against New England, 5.5. They lost the yards per play, 5.5 to 4.1. The turnover battle, New England lost 4-1, and it still ends up being a 6-point game. Josh Allen hasn't really been his dominant self during this winning streak. Stephon Diggs, like, who knows what's up with him right now? He's playing 2/3 of the snaps. He ran only 26 of 35 routes last week. And obviously Buffalo doesn't have the best depth at playmakers next to Diggs. So for me, it's just a little bit high. But like I said, I haven't even bet Miami now, and it's more of just monitor the injury report. But it's just a slight lean towards Miami right now.
All right, we got differing opinions on the sides here between Suma and Hitman. Eric, you wanted to talk a little bit about the total in this game.
Yeah, I like under in this one, and I know I'm getting a little bit of resistance from when I initially made my opinion, but like when I'm looking at, and I know, like you said, PFF grades are not the be all end all, although I think along the offensive and defensive front, they do a better job than in the secondary and at receiver. There's one starting offensive lineman on either team that has a PFF grade above 75, and that's Teron Armstead at left tackle. And for all we know, he might go out after 10 plays, knowing his history. So the offensive lines for both of these teams are incredibly tenuous. The other thing that we know is that, in order to get a total in today's NFL to go over, you need explosive plays. And these teams have been less explosive or have given up less explosives than you think. Buffalo, as far as chunk plays, so plays over 20 yards in the passing game, have been basically middle of the pack. And Miami has been, just inside the top 10. Miami's pretty good as far as chunk plays in the run game, 15 yards or more. They're top 5 in the league, but Buffalo has actually been pretty good, as has Miami at giving. Buffalo hasn't been that good at not surrendering them, but Miami has only given up, 13 of them all year, which is in the top 5. So I think both teams, match up pretty well as far as, playing this game to the under in this one. And so when I look at this game, like 50 is a lot of points, especially considering, Jalen Waddle being out. Buffalo plays kind of a contained style defense in the passing game. Rasul Douglas is kind of one of those like perfect zone corners, to your point. Tua's arm strength is not going to be nearly as good as it normally is. And then, possibly no Jalen Waddle as well. I have yet to find somebody who hates somebody as much as Joe Brady hates Stephon Diggs. So I think that there's just simply a lot of things aligning for this. Sure, early in the season, you looked at that game, 48-20, game played totally to the over, but I think a lot has changed over the course of this season, over the last 13 weeks, for this game to play well to the under here. And there's a last part of this as well. Mike McDaniel is very much a progressive, go for it, that kind of coach. I think Sean McDermott in the favorite role is going to play to the defensive kind of style, coach that is going to play to an under in this game. And so that's also like sort of the last pit of this handicap for me, is that I think the coach of the favorite team is going to play sort of to the lower scoring element of this game.
A lot of comments in the chat. Matthew, Buffalo offense is no bueno. Ekshesh, Buffalo offense, low key, not good. Cottage, maybe the boys can give their thoughts on Buffalo offense is low key, not good. Depends on how you define good, because I think Buffalo's offense is above average. The thing for me with the Buffalo Bills is that there's been a complete transformation from what we typically think of the Bills, which is this high-flying, explosive offense. Last year, having some issues on defense, they could be beat for big plays. To me, it's completely flipped now, where the offense is like, there is no explosiveness. If they're going to work down the field, it's methodical. And the defense is the side of the ball that's making the plays. I agree with Eric here. I think that this total is too high, but there's like so much uncertainty in this game as well, which I don't know if is baked into this. It's not baked into this total, in my opinion. Like Josh Allen has a stinger. Like he's got a neck injury right now that he's dealing with, and he sucked last week. He was horrendous. So I don't know that it matters, but I think there's a 0% chance that it doesn't matter. You got Tua dealing with a shoulder injury. Okay, Jalen Waddle, he could return. What's a wide receiver going to look like 1 week off of a high ankle sprain? Like that's a huge performance impact. And they play next week, no matter whether or not they win the division. Are they bringing Waddle back and risking further injury when they know they have to play next week? There's just too many things here that I agree with Eric's handicap as a whole. But I think Buffalo is very quietly shifted to this under model team. I bet the over against the Patriots last week. This is not to pat myself on the back. The number was low, but it was so incredibly lucky because of all those turnovers that were happening on, in great field position over the course of that game. So I'm with Eric here. We're split on the side, but I do like the under in this game. All right, guys, before we get into best bets, let's break down the futures market heading into the playoffs here at Pinnacle Sportsbook. whether it's the AFC champion, the NFC champion, Super Bowl futures, anything that stands out to anyone here as we have the odds up on screen as something that might be worth playing heading into the playoffs. Suma, I'll throw it to you here first. One team that you maybe are a little bit higher on than market that you think that they have a better chance than the odds indicate here.
The only thing that really pops up for me a little bit is Rams plus 2130 to win the NFC. I think I'm slightly higher on the Rams in general. And I think when you look at the NFC playoff picture, like, where is the great defense? Like, the Rams have a borderline top 10 offense, veteran coaching staff, veteran quarterback, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nakua, great run game with Kyren Williams. That offense can get hot on like any given weekend in the playoffs. And then you are facing the defenses of the likes of the Cowboys, who are not great, the Detroit Lions, Eagles maybe, who cannot defend anything. 49ers, still the best defense, but also not that great this year. So I think there's a path where the Rams can hit some decent variance on offense and just score enough points to keep a lot of these playoff games or potential playoff matchups competitive.
All right. Suma likes the Rams. That was something that I had looked at as well. My fair value on that was like plus 1960, which is really only a 0.3% edge to put it into perspective. But I honestly, in the futures markets, you're not going to tend to find super high value. I'm kind of in agreement there. I'll share another one as well. But Hitman, anything for you that you think is worthwhile here?
Could you show me the AFC odds again real quick?
Yeah, we'll get those up there. So Baltimore favored 121, Buffalo 384.
Yeah, I mean, Buffalo being ahead of Kansas City when there's a realistic chance that if Buffalo loses as a 3-point favorite, that they won't even be in the playoffs. That strikes me as probably the worst value on the board right now. And if I was to make a forced play, you know, I feel like I say this every single season for like the past 5 years, but Kansas City at plus 450. I mean, you've given Patrick Mahomes probably the best defense that he's had throughout his entire tenure. Like, there could be a path, like, even though the offense isn't what it used to be, like if Kansas City can hold teams into the 20s, which they've shown throughout the year that they're more than capable of, and Mahomes with this team, like, for once, he doesn't have to be Superman. Like, he has to play better than what he's played, especially towards the end of this year, but he doesn't have to be Superman to win with this team. So I'll give Kansas City a look.
Eric, was that a fist pump because you're a Chiefs fan, or is that a fist pump because you think that there's some value there as well?
Yeah, I make it plus 400 fair, which it's at sumersports.com if you want to look at that. Like, there's a number of reasons why they're not playing anybody really this week, so there's like a little bit of a lack of, like, there's for a lot of those teams, to Hitman's point, those numbers can only get worse after this week for a lot of those teams, but for the Chiefs, they can really only get better. But the other one, and to the point, like, there's a couple things that play in the Chiefs' favor. Like, they're a bottom 5 team in terms of penalty EPA delta, and they're a bottom 5 team in terms of turnover EPA delta, which I think some people will say, well, they're just a sloppy team, but those are pretty variable week to week, right? Like, they've given up, they went 3 quarters without giving up a completion 2 weeks ago, and then they went 3 quarters without giving up a point last week. But they haven't forced any turnovers in those games either. And so everybody's talking about how those games are too close for comfort. But, like, to Hitman's point, they have a great defense, but they're not blowing teams out because they're not forcing turnovers. Like, that could very well just regress to the mean and, like, have them win a game comfortably in the playoffs. They're also, to the point before, which is actually like a fairly stable thing, they and Cleveland are tied for giving up the fewest passing plays of over 20 yards this season at 37. So their defense is incredibly good at not surrendering the things that kill you. If the best player in the world can just elevate his play by like 5 to 10%, like, this team could actually legitimately win the AFC. And so I like that bet a lot. I'm not just trying to be a homer. Like it's incredibly painful to watch their games this year. Like I'll admit that, but like I do think it's actually a pretty good number for all the reasons that Hitman said.
This might be square. It might not be square, but I ran a full sim before we did the show today. I showed two edges. One was the one that Suma game, which was Rams to win the NFC. The other one was the San Francisco 49ers to win the Super Bowl at plus 230. Plus 230 is an implied probability of 30%. For those that don't know, I have them closer to 33.5% in the plus 200 range to win the Super Bowl this year. I mean, listen, I just really think that they're far and away the best team in the NFC. And I don't know that they're going to face much resistance in the NFC this season. So that's the one for me that stands out. I mean, I think we just get them off of that Baltimore game a few weeks ago where now everyone's questioning them because of that. I still think that they're by far the most complete team overall. So that's the one for me that stands. I'm curious, Eric, you got the numbers up at Sumer as well. What do you guys make the 49ers to win the Super Bowl?
Yeah, we make them fair to win the Super Bowl. We make them 2-1.
Okay, so you would be in, you'd have value at plus 230 as well because you're at plus 200.
Yeah, I gravitate towards the Chiefs just because I had a bunch of narratives that I thought made sense there. But I mean, the Niners, it's just boring to say it. But actually, somebody had the question. I think it was Kevin Clark today or this week on Twitter, which said, like, if your life depended on it, which four teams would you actually have to would you stake? And like it, and I think the right choice is those four, which would be like San Francisco, Baltimore, probably, Dallas. But like, would you actually make it San Francisco and 3 AFC teams?
I wouldn't. So I saw a lot of that going around this week, and I was personally cheesed that no one was including the Cowboys as their top four. I think the Cowboys have a better chance to win the Super Bowl than the Bills. The Bills might not even make the playoffs. And I honestly think
Rob,
Dallas is better than Buffalo.
On Mike McCarthy executing a 4-minute drill.
But it's probably going to only be against San Fran. That's
true.
That's the thing. It's like, I mean, there's everyone has kind of got the same four, right? But I'm different there.
True. I think my only issue with the Cowboys is like the situational stuff I get what you're saying, but the situational stuff for the Cowboys kills me every time.
Yep. Fair enough. I know there's some disagreement on how I price San Fran there. To each their own, people. You're allowed to bet your own money. You can do whatever you want. I'm just saying that's my price on the game. And candidly, I just don't see very many resisting forces in the NFC or really in the league right now to the 49ers. All right, guys, let's get into the best bets for this week. Before we do that, just want to remind everyone of our schedule on Forward Progress. Our final live watch along of the season, the regular season, comes on Sunday night for Bills Dolphins. So I'll be live on air 11 a.m. Eastern time in the morning for Pizza Buffet, and then live on air on Sunday night. Beginning next week for the playoffs, this show will be moving to Thursday afternoon at the same time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. So typically we're on Wednesdays. Starting next week, it's going to be Thursdays. We're typically going to have less games to work with over the course of the playoffs. This allows us to hit prop markets as well, talk about everything, alternative markets in the game, and those are just a little bit more widely available on Thursdays rather than Wednesdays. So that's the reason for the move. Make sure that you adjust your calendars accordingly, but make sure you're subscribed here on Forward Progress. And if you just hit that notification bell, you get alerted anyways in real time. All right. As is tradition here with best bets, we do tend to start with last week's winners first. Dr. Eric Eager, you're up to start 2024. Who's the best bet and why?
I'm going to go with the AFC East championship game, which is Sunday Night Football in Miami. I'm going to go with the under in Buffalo, Miami. I think it's good to 49. We got to shield off the the 7 touchdowns there. Just that's a joke. But yeah, I think, look, the offensive lines for both teams are not particularly good. In the case of Buffalo, I think that's mostly by design. I think in the case of Miami, it's mostly because of injuries. The Bills have done a good job of patching together their defense post-injury. The Rasul Douglas trade has been a revelation for them. Miami is not going to have much in the way of a deep ball with the Tua Tagovailoa injury to his shoulder, as well as the Jalen Waddle injury. I also think that Miami's done a pretty good job of limiting explosive runs. They've been top 5 in that. James Cook has been really the source of offense for Buffalo over the past month and a half. I think they'll be able to limit that pretty well as well. And I think Miami's going to try to run with Devin Achane, and I think Buffalo is going to limit that. Buffalo hasn't seemed all of that interested in getting Stephon Diggs, involved. And unless it's the 1 out of every 4 games where Gabe Davis goes off, I don't think they're going to be all that explosive in the passing game. So I think this one is an under game. Lastly, we've seen Sean McDermott, backslide quite a bit on the 4th down wokeness that he's had over the past few years. And with a division title, their 4th straight on the line, I think he's going to play it closer to the vest and punt those punts near midfield, which is going to be tough in today's NFL to go over when you're trading, punts when those touchdown drives need to actually happen. So I like under 50 here.
All right. Eric's betting the under on our live watch along Sunday Night Football, Bills and the Dolphins. Next, we go not to the losers, but to the person who was off last week. Now, this is going to be a first in Forward Progress best bet history. Hitman was going to give a best bet. It went off the board because of news. It has reopened in some spots, but is not open at Pinnacle right now. So we're going to let him give 2 best bets on this week's show. This allows him to try to inch closer towards Suma. I like that for the angle of the show, but also gives him a chance to redeem himself. So bet number 1 is going to be a market consensus price, and bet number 2 is going to be a price that is available at Pinnacle Sportsbook. So we'll throw to you, Hitman, 2 best bets this week. Let the people know what you like and why.
All right. So I like the Niners against the Rams, whatever market consensus price, good with me. So I wish that Sean McVay would have waited to say that Carson Wentz was starting this game, because I had a pretty good feeling since Sunday night that was going to happen, and there were some better prices out there. But I still think that this is short. And a lot of the reason that this is short right now is because there's so much unknown about what San Francisco is going to do with their starters. We know that the Rams are not going to play a lot of their main starters. Probably Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp won't play, especially because they just signed a wide receiver to the active roster. With San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan's never been in this spot before where he was going to have the bye week, or where he could rest starters before the bye week. And he said that Mike Shanahan, his father, that he believes that it cost him a 3rd Super Bowl by the fact that Denver sat starters before the bye week back in the 90s. He said that John Lynch, who's very close to Tony Dungy, spoke about how he believes that the Colts were cost Super Bowls by sitting starters and with the bye week coming up. I just think that based off how adamant Shanahan's been about this, we're going to see the San Francisco starters, at least for the first half. I'm sure Christian McCaffrey's not going to play, probably no Trent Williams, but Deebo Samuel's already come out and said that he's going to be playing in this game. I suspect that we're at least going to get starters for the first half, which in that case, we're getting San Francisco starters against the Rams backups for the first half. First half line probably should be at least something around 7, if that ends up being the case, before they give way to Sam Darnold in the second half. I just think that it's underpriced based off the speculation that San Fran might not play guys. And I think that San Fran does ultimately end up playing guys, at least for the first half. So that's best bet number 1. And best bet number 2, we spoke about it earlier, Chicago Bears +3.
All right. 2 bets from Hitman here. And the logic is there. If you think that San Fran is going to play starters for a portion of this game, price is undervalued. One thing I'll add to that as well is the Rams' depth is got to be one of the worst in the NFL, in my opinion. Just looking at their depth chart, once you start to get backups there, pretty rough as well. So Hitman, 2 bets this week. Suma, over to you. Who's the best bet this week and why?
And we will hopefully make it a clean sweep on the season. I think Hitman's and mine consensus best bets are 1-0 on the season with the Vikings earlier this season. I will also go with the Bears here for all the reasons that we have mentioned. Packers offense have been great, but this is a tough test against a super stout Bears defense that defends the run well, defends play action well. And on the other side, I don't really see how this Packers defense with Joe Barry at DC will defend the Bears dual threat rushing attack. I think Bears offense should be fine, and they might be well equipped to play spoiler here.
All right. 2 Bears back to back, a match on that one. It's been hit or miss this year, but I think you're right. I think when you guys have paired up, it's been winners in the past. So hopefully another winner there. I'll close it off here with taking the Carolina Panthers against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, I'm using the main Pinnacle market right now, plus 5.5, minus 122, but you can click that drop-down box. You can get a plus 4.5, minus 110. I think that's playable all the way up to minus 121. Now, typically, I don't like to take bets that I've already steamed a little bit, but I'm using my biggest numbers edge for this week, and this is the one. These teams played on December 3rd. It was week 13. Bucs won by a field goal. The market closed minus 3.5 with Tampa at home in that game. In that game, the Bucs had a 32% success rate on offense. They struggled to move the ball on 60 offensive plays. For perspective, Carolina's success rate, 44%. Now let's look at between then and now to see what has changed significantly and whether this number is warranted. Tampa Bay is playing marginally better than their season-long stats. We can't deny that. Forget about last week. Over the course of the last 5 or 6 weeks, they've been fine. Their schedule adjusted efficiency ratings, they're better on both offense and defense. But so are Carolina's. And yes, they got shut out last week at Jacksonville, but they're stretching the field a lot more in the vertical passing game. Their offense has gone from being like a nightmare to being just bad. And that's an improvement enough for me. They could get a defense without Shaq Barrett, who's their best pass rusher, potentially starting corner Carlton Davis, who missed last week as well. And meanwhile, Carolina's D has significantly improved. The secondary is completely healthy. Brian Burns, Yetur Gross-Matos, healthy on the defensive line. No injury designation for Frankie Louvu. This is a defense that in the middle of the season was extremely beat up, and now they're basically at full strength. I don't think you should blindly bet against teams that need to win this week. But in this instance, I think that there's some serious inflation because Tampa does need to win this game. I haven't even talked about Baker Mayfield, DNP with a rib injury. He's not going to be 100% for this game. I just think it's too many points. So give me the Carolina Panthers. Hopefully they don't look hopeless, but I do like them in this spot against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. First time, 5 best bets on the program this week. Hopefully we're going 5-0. Hopefully we're going 5-0. As we wrap another episode of Forward Progress here, I do want to take a moment to extend heartfelt wishes to everyone, each and every one of our viewers out there for supporting us over the course of the past year. Here's to a year filled with victories, both on and off the field for everyone who does follow the Forward Progress YouTube channel here. So happy New Year to everyone. May 2024 be a very good year for each and every one out there. We do appreciate all of you. For myself, Rob Pizzola, for Dr. Eric Eager of Sumer Sports, make sure you check out Sumer Sports. You do have the league table there if you're looking to bet futures as well. For Suma, for Hitman, for a producer, Jason Cooper behind the scenes. This has been another edition of Forward Progress Best Bets presented by Pinnacle Sportsbook right here on the Hammer Betting Network. Everyone, good luck with your bets this week. Peace out.